It was very intimate in the old Assembly Hall, but the Civic Centre gave a much better platform for presentation of bands. And the building's capacity, although people still complained about the bars, they were a lot bigger than what you've got in the old theatre. So generally it was more comfortable.
All sorts of different genres coming together in all sorts of different ways. The main theme of which was the move to punk. And when that happened, about 76, 77, that was definitely a revolution. And at that point, I wondered if I'd carry on, to be honest, because I was basically an old hippie. You know, didn't like the idea of this sort of... I remember someone coming to one of the punk gigs with a T-shirt saying hate and war. And that's really what I didn't stand for, hate and war. So it was more a case of, you know, are we going to embrace this or are we going to bow out? And after the Stranglers gig, which was the first one that really shocked everybody, I mean, you know, before we had guys standing on the door saying, don't come in with your glasses, a glass of beer. And these guys from London just came down, laughed at them, and just went straight through with their glasses of beer. This hasn't happened before. You know, nobody's done this before. So overnight, I became sort of, rather than sort of the hippie music provider, to sort of commander-in-chief of the forces, you know, with the security and everything else. We used to have big security meetings at the beginning of the evening. And I remember occasionally we'd say that the Bedford Skins are coming, you know, and everybody start trembling.
I can't remember which concert it was, David would probably tell you, but there was skinheads came from Bedford and everybody was worried to death about this particular gig. And when they came in, it was so nice, it's nice here, and they were so well behaved that it wasn't a worry at all.
I thought it was refreshing. I got rather fed up with some of the progressive rock in the mid-70s, and I thought the scene needed a good shake-up, and the better punk bands did that successfully.
The first Friars gig I attended was in the 80s, early 80s. I just turned 15, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one of 15 years of age in that particular concert hall, and that was The Beat.
I used to look at the equipment because I actually had a job working in the event.
You had a job? Wow.
When Friars moved to the Civic Centre, I got a job there as, you know, helping out in the mornings, chairs and all that sort of thing. And so, of course, I would be one of the guys that would be involved in setting up the hall that morning for the gig that evening. And so I used to see all the gear coming in. And I'd, you know, do anything to check all the gear out and see what equipment they're using.
Yeah.
And I'd see them start building it up for the sound check. So it was fantastic to spend the whole day there watching it happen.
I think it was more the music. It was just because it was such a, you know, you didn't want to go to London and stand at sort of Wembley and, you know, like 30, 40, 50, 60,000 people. You could get up to close and personal. You could touch them. You could gob at them if you were that way inclined. But
one of my favourite ones at the Civic was Steve Hackett. And I went along with my lady at the time to Voyage of the Acolyte. That was a good one. Steve Hillage. Fish Rising was a particularly good one.
I went to see Bauhaus play. That was my first gig. Great gig, as I remember, beautiful guy. And my second gig was the Human League with lovely Phil Oakey, who I just thought was just, apart from David Bowie, the most perfect man. But I was quite gutted because I was not so tall, so I was down the front, and I only found out afterwards he was wearing high-heeled shoes, which at that time was quite outrageous.
One of the things that Friars did, which made a huge difference to the sort of town musically, was it just encouraged live music generally. I'd started a club down at the Bell Hotel, and then the King's Head started doing shows, and then there was one time about 5 venues in Aylesbury that were promoting music. I mean, it really was a hotbed. I mean, and it was Friars basically that gave this whole feeling that the town had something special, and that's when it got its own newspaper together, the Rock Set, and the whole local scene did get to a point where it could actually fill Friars with local bands.
We met at Friars' Christmas party in 1976, which was an Eddie and the Hot Rods gig. Mm-hmm. We actually met right at the end of the gig, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
The rest is history, really.
Nice. Yeah.
I
came to Friars regularly between 1978 and 1982. The last two gigs being the Kid Creole concerts, which for me were the best gigs I've ever seen in my life.
In the 80s, it was the place to go. First heard about it from some sixth formers at school, and they were buzzing about this place with its fantastic music. So I used to babysit as much as I could, whatever money, run down to Earth Records, buy a ticket, and turn up at the gig, not knowing what to expect.
I was constantly reassuring members that it was a good thing to have in the town for the young people. And over the months and years, gradually, a lot of members, this is elected council members, would come to Friars and see how good it was. And in the end, it won them over totally.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great honour actually at the time to be in a local band and be asked to play somewhere so prestigious. And it was a local event called the Aylesbury Rock Explosion.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And
we were in a band called Orthy.
sort of felt like you'd made it.
I remember thinking the stage seemed huge, didn't it? Because we'd only ever played in little village halls or,
The pub.
Oh yeah, pubs. We used to play a lot of pubs.
First Friars gig I came to was Susie and the Banshees in 1979, but my relationship with Friars goes back to about 75 or 76. I was very much influenced by music my older cousin was playing, and I saw the news sheets and the posters, and I thought one day, and in 79 I finally did get to Friars.
U2 came in, early 80s, and they're supported by Altered Images. And I stood in front of Claire Grogan, and it was like, wow, I'm in love with Claire Grogan, and she was there doing I remember her skirt, and she was doing this happy birthday. And then when U2 come on, I heard the first song, and I thought, nah, this is not for me. I remember going upstairs to the bar and only heard one song, because I think they'd only just sort of, I Will Follow was the only one, and I remember watching that, and then...
Well, according to recent information, the first time I came to Friars would have possibly been Dr. Feelgood and GT Moore and the Reggae guitars, I think. End of 75.
Dr. Feelgood, brilliant. I really liked them. Again, a good stage act. Wilco, what a man. And what can you say about the old R&B ethos again? Out front, playing to the audience, straight from the pub rock scene. But yeah, and brilliant. And of course, from the pub rock scene, who can we never forget but Mr. Jerry? What a man, what a wordsmith, and what a band.
I remember seeing definitely Ian Jory, he was so different at the time, Pretty Things, and Cockney Rebel. I was rather in love with Steve Harley.
Well, I was underage and I went to, I think it was Jonathan Kelly, Twice Around the Houses, and Andy Fairweather Low, but I was too young to go. I remember that. Shouldn't really have been there.
Tangerine Dream, that was a strange one. Sat on the floor, everybody sat down.
When it was in the Civic Centre, my first gig properly then was Split Ends. And I can remember, we used to go there. I think it was because it was the social, it was the place to go. But I did spend a lot of time in the bar. And then I, think if there was something that I wanted to see or I heard something, then I'd go through. And I can remember going through and seeing Split Ends, and just, it was unbelievable. They were amazing.
I think we played Friars 4 times, wasn't it, Robin? We played as Orthy, then we played as...
Then it was the Cameras.
Was it the Robins? Orthy, Robins, Cameras, and then Heartbeat with Simon Cheetham.
Well, it was obviously more modern and spacious, and the sound was probably better because it was a difficult sound for the bands to get in the borough. I think Queen probably got it right, and Bowie, but the sound was better, and it was nicer, I think, in a way, different.
The Ramones with the Talking Heads supporting was just fantastic. I tell people that nowadays, and nobody believes me, that they actually played in Aylesbury.
I remember the Ramones a lot, and they were just, again, something that I felt at the time were a bit of a guilty pleasure, but I loved them big time. They were just out and out pure power rock. They took the punk ethos but knocked it into another ballpark.
In early 75, I think it would have been, I actually started working with David managing Earth Records. I did that for about 18 months. So I was involved then with the running of Friars, particularly obviously the ticket selling side of things. But I remember David also used to sort of, because I was obviously selling records and kind of probably had a bit of a fix on who was hot and who was not, and you know, what people were buying. David often used to, particularly if he was thinking of booking somebody who was, you know, a bit of a long shot, or somebody who wouldn't be an obvious choice to come to Friars, he'd sort of check in with me and say, okay, you know, have you sold any records of these guys or anything? I remember when, for example, Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen, another, you know, great American band, came over and he put them on, and was sort of deciding, should I do it or shouldn't I? And I happen to be a big fan of Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen, so I said, yeah, definitely put them on.
A standout gig for me really was Camel.
Yes, yeah, beautiful.
I think I saw them a couple of times, but the first time I saw them I was quite disappointed because I expected something a bit more heavy rock. And they're very sort of prog rock, really. And when I listened to it again on an album the next day, everything clicked, and I was really hooked on them for quite some time.
It was the 9th of September 1979, and it was advertised in the Bucks Herald as a big mod revival, and there were 4 bands on. There was Squire, a local band called the Stowaways, Secret Affair, and Madness. And Madness just charted a single called The Prince. They'd been on Top of the Pops the Thursday before. No one knew anything about them, and suddenly there was this weird barrel organ, funky thing going on, and it was just amazing. It was mind-blowing. It was mind-blowing. I saw them again when they were famous around November '79, and it was nowhere near as good.
We watched Sassafras, UFO were quite good, Jack the Lad, Stackridge. Weren't my cup of tea. It was the punk thing that really did it for us, and that was, we virtually lived there. We just scanned the enemy for the tour dates every time Friars come up. We sort of did a little jig because we knew there was another one coming for us to go to.
I was very lucky as a teenage boy to follow Debbie Harry up the stairs, and I couldn't believe this sort of unbelievable figure. Perhaps I shouldn't say that. But The Police, fantastic show, remember The Police? And you could tell then, because they'd just had their first album out, I think, and you knew that they were going to be megastars. You know, Sting particularly, just unbelievable how he held the audience in his hand.
Queuing up in the cattle market twice for Genesis and The Police was brilliant. I think the Police one was great. The camaraderie was amazing. It was a warm night, and I have memories from the middle of the night of something like a 36-a-side football match where somebody who, I've no idea who, with a megaphone, was kind of a commentator stroke referee in the middle of the night. That went on till the ball burst. That was fantastic memories.
Well, I have memories of queuing in the cattle market, sleeping overnight for Genesis and for The Police. It was just a great vibe and really exciting that everybody got together and we just slept in the pens virtually, you know. It was really exciting and just so desperate to get a ticket, you would have done anything, you know.
But I remember, I think one of the gigs when I think we were all gobbing at Stig, and he said, if you keep gobbing at me, I'm going to come off. And we turned around, I think we just gobbed even more.
Oh, well, I saw most of the Ska gigs, Body Snatchers, Bad Manners, the Specials, the Selector, and unfortunately the Specials was the worst Ska gig I went to because Terry Hall spent the whole time arguing with the skinheads in the front, so that was a crap gig. But they were supported by the Body Snatchers, who were much better. And very often with Friars gigs, the support acts were much better than the main acts.
Our group was rubbish, but we basically played any gig we were asked to. We turned up, we played, and we got a bit of a reputation. And so we badgered Dave for 2 years saying, give us a gig, please give us a gig, every time we saw him. And we never thought he would because we weren't that good. And then one day we got a phone call, someone rung me up at work and said, I can't remember who was working Earth Records, could you go down and speak to him? And he said, Dave Stops wants you to give him a ring. So I rang Dave and he said, yeah, I've got a gig for you if you want to play Friars. And I couldn't speak for maybe a minute after that, and then We were just so excited. Could not, and out of all the local bands we knew, we were the first one to actually be put on at Friars.
Some fantastic standout moments in that time. The Jam, Gillan, the Clash at Stat Mandeville, I thought was an amazing night.
The Clash, one of the great bands of the 70s, of course, and they had this somewhat democratic approach to their audiences, and they used to invite people backstage after the concert, and we all shared in their beer, I seem to recall. But it was quite striking to notice that nearly everybody clustered around Joe Strummer, and poor Mick Jones was sort of sat on the sidelines as a bit of a bystander, but everybody wanted to hear the word according to Strummer.
The first gig I ever came to was Still Pulse. Yeah, I can remember it because as a young boy, you go down to the Maxwell Hall and it was packed. I came to see Matumbi, as well as Aswad, and Dennis Brown.
Dennis Brown gig was very good, because I remember when they was rehearsing and we would sit outside the Civic and the bass line was dropping and they said, "Oh, please, can you turn on the bass?" Yeah, because it was heavy, because the Jamaican artists, they use the bass to give you like the feel and the heartbeat, you know.
I think I saw the first or the second one of Dennis Brown. I can remember going in. By chance that night, I was with a friend, and believe it or not, and I shouldn't say this, but we were under the stage and we listened to the actual sound check of the band. And what happened in the end, at the end of the night, we actually got a stage pass. So we met Dennis Brown. So we were like overwhelmed. Like, I think I got the little autograph too.
Yeah, I remember the Gregory Isaacs gig because my aunties and my friends, and there was a lot of people at that gig, and the music, exceptionally, the Roots Radix band, the music, it sounded like you was in the studio, like in your house. It was perfect.
We were playing the music on our little stereos at home, and then all of a sudden the artists were in town, you know, performing. So obviously, a lot of us had to be there. You know?
I remember Toots, because before Steel Pulse and Dennis Brown, Toots was always in my daddy record box, you know. Tootsie Birth and them, and they are them proper, good. They are. I think if you ask some of the reggae artists where they get their inspiration, is people like Toots.
And I was very lucky then to be employed. And I was one of the blue t-shirt boys who had the Friars Aylesbury Welcome t-shirts, and I would go down early on a Saturday. And our job was to kind of just police and supervise and look around and try and smile. And of course, the great thing about it was you could see the shows for free.
I remember seeing the Cramps, and he got part of his anatomy out. I remember that. I remember playing us seeing that, and I remember coming to, was it Gallagher and Lara's Sight and Sound in concert, and the microphones were hanging down, and we were shouting up to the microphones and trying to swear into them, you know, what you do.
After one of the Friars things, after we had the hit in 1977, and because of that, you know, I was a pop star, and I was, playing Friars in my own right as a legitimate star. And one of these concerts in '78, a chap called Albert Wallace turned up, was a director for ATV television. And we were chatting to him about these free concerts that I did every year. And the idea came up about having a really big one in the Market Square and ATV filming it for a documentary. And we actually pulled it off.
I don't remember much of when we headlined in '82, but I mean, '82 was a very frantic year for us with the release of the first EP, Market Square Heroes, and they playing Reading Festival and playing Theakston's Festival. But to headline at Friars, that kind of meant the most of anything really. It's like you felt like you had arrived. You were headlining in this legendary venue, following all your heroes. Yeah, it's a great feeling. It's a great feeling, and yeah, first of many times, of course.
You know, the first time I headlined Friars, it was a home gig for me, and it was the sort of, you know, we sort of knew that we would go down well even before we took on the stage. So, so it was very nice. It was You know, because from all of the years before where it had been quite a scary experience, it suddenly, it sort of changed. Because I suppose I'd had more experience of doing shows more, you know, up and down the country more.
Again, I'd read about Howard Jones on the news sheets, like I had with Marillion as the up-and-coming artist. And I saw Howard for the first time at the fashion gig. He was playing in the Aston Hall.
In 1982, when my, you know, my own career was just about getting going, and I remember we played in a bar, didn't we? The Walton, was it the Walton Lounge, which, you know, was David's idea for us to sort of be introduced to the Friars audience, and that was really cool. I remember it being a great atmosphere in there. And then the next time we played in the Aston Hall, which is, you know, a bit bigger, and then of course went on to the main stage. So it was a kind of progression, but I really enjoyed, you know, and that's the thing about playing live. It's good to have to sort of break yourself in and learn how to deal with like a smaller audience, then a slightly bigger one, and then you know the ultimate. Because otherwise, you know, because you learn so much when you play those small halls.
Every weekend we would see what was on, and then we would always go with a bunch of old school friends who I'm still friends with now. So sort of 30, 40 years later, my friends I went to school with, we still would go all to the gigs, and it'd be up to someone to go to Earth Records to get the tickets for, and I believe they had to be under £2. And it was always like to scrape the money together. Even though I had to work every other weekend, I would still come to a gig. And, you know, I'd realize when I used to have to get up at sort of 4 in the morning, you know, and your ears were buzzing from the night before.
I went to see Bauhaus at Friars, and it was good-natured from the Dawn people. Myself and my mate turned up. I'm in jeans and a yellow sweatshirt. And he said, "Have you come to the right gig, mate?" And he took the ticket off me, and as I walked in, everybody was in black from head to foot. Black makeup, black clothes, black hair, and I stood out like a sore thumb amongst all that lot.
You did actually manage Earth Records in the early days, didn't you?
I did indeed.
Yes, yeah. That was a great time too, for, you know, because we could sell tickets through the shop, and also sort of find out what music people liked, which gave us information about what bands to book. So Earth Records was a very important part of it.
I remember distinctly having 2 maxi skirts. I was very proud of these maxi skirts. One was dark brown, one was navy, and Lynn and I used to wear them with gingham checked, quite tight-fitting blouses. And I think we used to wear gingham perfume as well, which wasn't very nice, but fashionable at the time.
I remember, I think I went to the Madness, and I think that could have been in about 1982, and I bought a brand new cap-sleeved Levi t-shirt, and I remember buying it from the underground market. It had all the sort of trendy stuff, and I had this on, I had some nice trousers on, and I'm at the front there, and I was poking away, and some bloke come up behind me. I remember him going, and just ripping it right off my back. I mean, it's new, you know, and I thought, it's what you did, and then I turned around and I ripped his shirt off, you know, it's a thing you did, wasn't it?
Oh, well, what I drink at Friars? Well, I had a job. I used to work at John Kent's, the clothes shop at the top of the high street. So I'd save up on a Saturday for my money, about £3 a day or something. And I was very sparing with my drinks. So I might have the odd lager here and there, but I used to save up for my albums to buy my records. So I'm not a great drinker, no.
It varied, but I used to go shopping to Carol on the corner of Temple Street. Carol somebody, and it was very hippie, so long maxi skirts, cheesecloth, loons, what were those boots called? Desert boots. Or I'd go complete opposite and wear shorts and high shoes, and just, you'd dress up for Friars.
I think I was a bit of a punk, because I was going to get some food colouring off my mother, and it was the green food colouring, and then you had no gloves, and I remember sort of putting it in the hair, trying to spike up, getting some of my sister's hair gel, trying to spike it up, and then having food colouring, and having green hands for about a week, and going to school, and I say, "Oh, why you got green hands?" Managed to wash the food colouring out, but then trying to stick my hair up because I was a bit of a punk, but I'd like all kind of music because I'm always the lead up to the start of the gigs. I'd always play Papa's Got a Brand New Pig Bag. That was always the one I can remember always hearing that when you'd go in, and I'd always stand on the right hand side with it sort of in the speakers, and then you'd stick your head in the speakers for some strange reason.
We did a lot of tie-dye, didn't we? Tie-dye. So you did your own T-shirts and tie-dye. That was, I had a great big trench coat, an ex-fireman's trench coat with the silver buttons on. Yeah, it's brilliant.
I started off as a bit of a goth. So when I was still at school, I started shaving my eyebrows off so I could put as much makeup on as possible, and just black was very easy and cheap.
Some sort of skinny jeans, and then I remember getting some zips from my mum and getting some sewing some zips in, or getting a pair of old overalls and putting zips everywhere, and getting I never had any piercings. I remember getting a safety pin. If you folded it round that way, you put it in like that and made out it was through your mouth. Because you used to fold it back, look. Do you remember that? And then pretend one like that. But I remember getting the clothes, and remember getting some trousers, and getting remember getting the lead from the dog, because we had a couple of golden retrievers. We had a choker chain. I remember tying that, stitching it to the back of my trousers like that. I mean, so it was hanging down, wasn't it? And getting an old tartan beer mat and stitching that in the back of my trousers as well.
I'm not sure I actually met any boyfriends at Friars, but there was certainly a few there that I would have liked to have had as my boyfriend. But I don't think I actually had any boyfriends from Friars. It was all just really good fun.
Yeah, we'd go there and we'd get drunk and try to pull women, and we had a great time.
A lot of people don't know this, but my friends created a bogus band called James Fondle and the Orgasms, and they reached number 3 in the Friars poll. It never existed. There was a complete enigma. It was a schoolboy joke, prank, but we reached number 3, and I think they tried to interview us once.
As you go in, we'd always go on the right-hand side, never on the left, always on the right. Just by the speakers, and then just sort of that pogo in and out of that bit. Never go to the left, always to the right. Don't know why. Maybe because I'm right-handed, but I don't know.
And there was such a great atmosphere in the bars that sometimes you'd sort of make it to the entrance to the hall and then just stand there chatting with your mates or whatever, watching the band, but talking to people as well, you know.
Legendary figures in the music biz, like MC5, like Lou Reed, like Iggy Pop, even like Commander K, and you think, what are these guys doing coming to this small, out-the-way Buckinghamshire market town? Absolutely extraordinary. When you look through the list of people who played at Friars over the years, you just think, wow, what were they doing there? And it was looking back, I mean, at the time it was fantastic, but looking back, it was such a privilege to have that, on your doorstep.
Yeah, it was a fantastic social. All the boys in the sixth form were there, so we liked to be there as well. It was fantastic, yeah.
And a whole bunch of us actually sort of basically made it off the back of that. Magenta Divine ended up with a career. I ended up with a career. I think Marillion were drawn into that because of the excitement of it, and their careers took off. For a while, I mean, it was. We used to describe it as sort of like a mini Liverpool, and there was an element of truth in that. There's nowhere else that seemed to have that sort of excitement.
Early in '83, I finally, came back to play the main stage with a China Crisis, and that was part of my first UK tour. But when we arrived in Aylesbury, it was like arriving home. This is the home gig, and I know that the Chinas were, had a little bit of a hard time that night, because pretty much I think most people there, for me, because they were supporting their local guy,
Howard was right on the edge of signing to Stiff Records, believe it or not. And David and I had some quite difficult conversations, and I'm sure he had some difficult conversations with Howard at the time, because the deals were fairly similar. And David persuaded Howard. I don't know how much arm twisting he needed to do, but I'm sure it was my own charm and personality that persuaded Howard himself. But it was you know, Howard came to WEA, and the rest is history.
Me and Willie, supported by Marillion, and then life changes. And the last show of that run of Friars was the other way around. It was Marillion headlining and me and Willie supporting.
Yeah, by the time we played Friars, the last show in '84, you know, things were definitely happening for us. We'd become quite a big band, and it was kind of like a little bit of kind of like the local heroes returning home sort of atmosphere, really. And I think a lot of people travelled from all over the country to see us at what was our home gig, and it made it very, very special. And I really liked that venue. I think to see live bands, it was a great place to see live music.
Okay, when Friars closed in '84, it was a massive gap in our lives for everyone that spent most of the time there. We sort of like we tried to fill the void going to different places, but nothing was the same. And even the latter ones now, the resurrected gigs, it's still got the same vibe. There's just nothing like it. So we went to a few in Wickham and a lot in London, but just, it was not because we knew the audience. All the audience knew each other, so it was one big party every Saturday night, basically, and everybody missed it really badly.
In the summer of 2007, I approached David Stops to see whether or not I could do a website all about Friars and documenting all the gigs, and see if we could try to find, get all the news sheets, all the flyers, tickets, thinking, I don't know how this is going to work. This is all kind of bravado, sort of, but you know, it worked, and very proud of it. Been a lot of work, but since Friars came back in 2009, again, it's just been amazing. It's just been like it never went away, particularly at the Civic Centre.
I mean, you only have to look at the fantastic Friars website and just to talk to people that you meet up with after, to see what an impact Friars had on people, what an important part of their growing up it was.
Interviewing people, I just thought it would sort of kind of add a bit of interest to the website, trying to talk to people, whether they be megastars or whether they were some of the support bands. You know, I think they've got a voice as well. And some of the interviews have been interesting. A couple of them have been giving out more information than you could possibly have imagined. Andy Fraser of Free, the interview of him was incredible, the information that came out of that, and more than I had ever imagined, whereas some of them have been almost monosyllabic. But most of them have been pretty good, but they've all been happy to be interviewed in the first place, so I can't complain.